Hello, Simone. Today we are going to be asking the age-old question: is if somebody is gay, can you turn them straight by electrocuting them?
Do you think you should turn gay?
I don't think it works like that.
Okay, well, Hot Topic's next on the list. Could I turn gay working there?
You can't just magically turn gay. This isn't Degrassi.
Why are you so against turning gay?
Because if you think you turned gay, there's some weird Christian guy who thinks he can electrocute you into turning back.
People think that?
No, so hold on. So actually, I feel like, for anyone who hasn't seen, there's this show in the US, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. It was on Netflix, right? And it's about a girl who grows up in this cult with a guy who lied to her about everything. And when she enters the world, she has to constantly find things and then be like, oh yeah, I need to check if this was a lie or not. And this happened to me recently around conversion therapy.
Okay.
Because, you know, I think if you grow up in the broadly like progressive sphere, the line is conversion therapy, gay, straight conversion therapy doesn't work.
Yeah.
And, you know, recently I found myself reflecting on this and I was like, oh yeah, but if it did work, they'd still say it doesn't work. Like they have an ideological reason to need to believe this.
Yeah.
Due to the way that they were framing like gayness as an identity. And what really hit me is when I asked an AI questions about this, it got really angry at me. I don't know if you noticed, but there's certain issues where I'm like, hey, can you just steel man this other perspective? It could not bring itself, Perplexity could not bring itself to steel man the other perspective.
And this is a really important thing for us to be talking about now specifically, because as of our recording now, this coming Monday, the Supreme Court is going to take up state bans on conversion therapy for LGBTQ plus children based on a Colorado case. So this is actively something that is being discussed.
Do you have a religious right to electrocute your children? That is, I'm joking, by the way. What we're going to go over is all of the different types of conversion therapy. The thing that really got me in the AI answer is, I don't know if you guys have ever asked an AI a question and it gives you parts of the answer that are just obvious and transparent lies.
Yeah.
Like it gave me a list of things that it said do nothing to change an individual's, you know, sexual expression, and one of those things was castration. And I was like, brother, I'm not like brother in Christ, I'm not saying that we should be castrating gay people, but it obviously changes their sexual expression.
Yeah.
And another thing that I just know, because I've done a lot of research on like LGBT stuff, is it will say, you know, you cannot change an individual's sexual orientation. And yet anyone who's familiar with like trans people just knows that wrong. About 43% of trans people report changes in their sexual orientation when they go through
hormone therapy. Yeah.
Was only about 13% experiencing a complete change, but 13% do experience a complete change. Exactly what gay conversion is supposed to achieve. Now, again, I don't think that many conservatives are like that. That doesn't really solve the problem for most conservatives, but it does show that there is a potential mechanism of action to achieve this. And in addition to that, you have the case of, it would say that like certain therapies didn't work, but then I'd ask, well, are these therapies used in other areas? And it's like, oh yeah, they're also used in like phobias and alcohol addiction. And I was like, do they work there? It turns out they don't mostly. So a lot of this stuff, it was actually right, but it was much more nuanced in how it said they don't in those instances. It was like,
interesting.
Well, some debate, but I will note here that you can be like, but what about all the studies that say it didn't work? One of the things that was a real red flag for me, that goes, well, there used to be a popularly cited study that said that it worked, but even the academic who wrote it had it retracted because it might cause harm.
Oh.
And then I was like, oh, so there was evidence out there and people could have lost their jobs for publishing that, which shows why you're getting such bias in what's being published. There is one study that's out there right now out of like the 36 studies on this that shows it could plausibly work. This one was a 2000 study, retrospective self-reports of changes in homosexual orientation, a consumer survey of conversion therapy clients. What I will note as we go over all the data and all the stuff here, if you're like, what's the actual answer to this? Mm-hmm. There does not appear to be a persistent and reliable way, i.e. the urban monoculture was kind of right on this, to induce a new arousal pattern in an individual.
Okay.
If I am not aroused by women, nothing that happens at gay conversion camp is going to make me aroused by women. If I am not aroused by men, nothing that happens at a gay conversion camp will make me aroused by men.
Okay.
Doesn't mean Nothing can. You could like try to do a gender reassignment with hormones, but I think if you're a conservative Christian and you have a problem with same-sex attraction, that is not the pathway that you are interested in taking.
You're right.
And it doesn't even work all the time. It works like 13% of the time and 50% of the time. Basically, given that 50%, have new arousal patterns afterwards, gender reassignment and like hormone therapy is like re-rolling your character in terms of what arouses you.
Yes, yeah. Which is actually the one we've had, I think, different maybe podcasts about this, where we talk about how if you're dealing with severe depression, completely changing your identity by also changing your gender and your hormonal profile could successfully kickstart you out of it. And it's not the fact that you had gender dysmorphia per se that changed it. It's the fact that your entire hormonal profile and identity and clothing changed. Snapped you out of it.
Changing the way that you see yourself and relate to other people is one of the easiest ways to change sort of persistent psychological issues. So like we're trying to be as sort of fair-minded on this topic as we can be as we go into the data. However, what is also true, and where the left is just lying about this, is while you can't induce a new arousal pattern, there are plenty of ways to suppress an individual's libido and arousal patterns. And we did another video, something like my husband's not gay, or like I would be okay if you, I don't remember what it was, something like that, where we basically say that like I'm okay with same-sex attracted individuals deciding that they want to be in cross-sex relationships. I don't think that like that's something that we as a society need to freak out about or police them on. And I can understand why an individual might want that. For me, one of the most powerful things I ever read in regards to that was from an Amish kid on Rumspringa, which is, when they leave their family and go live like in the secular world for a year, when they go through like a bit after puberty, basically, before they decide to come back in the community and decide to be an Amish. And he was saying in it, he, having lived in the secular world now recognized I am a same-sex attracted or gay individual, but I am still going to go back to live in the Amish world. With the point he was making was, even though like I understand I can fulfill certain things more easily by continuing to live in the secular world, there was just a greater sense of purpose, of mental well-being, of sort of a life that he really wanted in the future if he went back to the Amish world. And he saw the having to have sex and have a wife who he wasn't attracted to, part of that is being marginally more challenging, but not worth giving up everything else that came with an Amish life. And in the video game that we're doing now, talking about like weird woke themes, because you can almost say that the LLM game, it's coming along great, really excited, takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, post-fertility collapse world. And one of the early sort of conflicts is I tried to do an inversion of the typical thing here, which is a young kid wants to go live with the Mormons, and he is same-sex attracted, and he knows that he will have to live a different type of lifestyle, and his mom doesn't want him to go live with the Mormons, being like, but you're same-sex attracted, like you should stay, live with us, live this lifestyle. But I thought it was a fun inversion of this particular debate that you see so frequently, and interacting with it. For me, I like, with all the characters I'm creating interesting interactions and debates that cause the player to look at issues from a different angle.
Right.
But okay, so I'm going to go into this. Anything you wanted to say, Simone?
Just to give a little bit of context to why I think you find it often practical that people who are still same-sex attracted get into heterosexual relationships, is that it can be, if you care more about having a family, if you care more about being able to maintain a certain community, it's just a no-brainer. And I think the fact that we live in an age where people put sex lives above family and community is pretty crazy. That like
it is.
And your extracurricular sex life is more important than that.
And think about what is meant by this. I mean, if you talk about something like the Amish or like a conservative Mormon community or a conservative like Catholic community, these community identities mean a lot to the people who are part of them.
Yeah.
And I think that we in our society trivialize them as just, seeing them as the oppressive thing that they can be framed as,
Mhm.
instead of the reverent. I mean, for example, if I'm a conservative Catholic and I grow up as a conservative Catholic, even though I'm same-sex attracted, I might believe that, like, the Catholic God exists and everything that's said in like Catholic theology is real.
Right.
Like, and yet we treat it like it's a mistake to make that choice. Or the Amish person is like, well, I mean, I'm choosing between this and not necessarily heaven, but the wholesome life I could otherwise live with this community and community support.
Yeah, a little more context beyond that too. Alyssa Grenfell talks about this actually. Many people who grow up in these more conservative religious communities where people, for example, know that they're gay, but still marry someone of the opposite sex, they sort of grow up thinking that sex is not going to be pleasurable for them at all. Like Alyssa Grenfell talks in detail about how her OBGYN at BYU, when she was about to get married, was like, well, sex is painful for many women. And she actually gave her this like dilator to use like before she had sex for the first time to try to make like, I think maybe to break her hymen, like to make it less painful. Like it's just not framed. Like they're not expecting at any point in their lives sex to be amazing, which is of course is very different from what that other conservative influencer got.
What are they called? It was these two Mormon women.
No,
right?
they're not Mormon. Those aren't Mormon. Jesus.
Oh yeah, no, they were part of some conservative.
But yeah, oh my gosh. So while they grew up certainly expecting sex to be amazing, not all conservative religious groups
Girl
do.
defined.
Girl defined.
How our episode, how girl defined ruined an entire generation of women. But I actually think that this is really bad.
No, but my point is many additional communities, including many subsets of the LDS church, apparently basically never expect sex to be amazing, and many just never have a satisfying sex life and never thought that was important, and yet they still end up having tons of kids. So how can it be a surprise to someone of like, oh well, I'm not attracted to this person, but we're going to have sex anyway? Like, just whether it's being sexually oriented toward a specific sex or just expecting sex to be pleasurable. Like if you're not even expecting sex to be pleasurable, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I actually think
physical
that's
action.
much more culturally healthy. And that's why we did the video on Girl Defined, is that Girl Defined maintained the idea of chastity until marriage. And then you would get married and then sex would be the most amazing thing because sex is better in marriage. And I'm like, that's not something you should ever be teaching someone, is like, sex is better because you wait to have it in marriage. It's like, as somebody who's had a lot of sex, that's like objectively not true. Like,
sick burn, Malcolm.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, as a guy, for example, if you're sleeping with a lot of people, like the pleasure that you get from that sex is going to be, I would suppose, easier to access.
Just keep digging, Malcolm.
Hey everybody, today we're going to teach you how to dig yourself a hole. To begin with, you need yourself a pair of very durable work boots. Steel-toed, preferably.
No, just because it's multiple people. Just because it's multiple people.
Well, anyway, I think the important note though is that yes, the girl defined message that they grew up with was very toxic.
But it messes up their head because they get into marriage and then it's not that great.
I'm saying it was really toxic, and I'm saying one thing that I love Alyssa Grenfell. She is an ex-Mormon YouTuber and TikToker. She wrote a book about leaving the Mormon Church, where I really disagree with a lot of her episodes. Like I just watched a really long episode she did on Mormon funerals, where she's like, oh, isn't it horrible that they restrict this and they restrict that? Like you're not supposed to have a Mormon funeral that lasts more than like the church service shouldn't be more than an hour. And I'm like, yes, thank you. They're like, just for considering the people there, like, let's just keep it going. Don't get too emotional. Like think on the positive things. You'll be reunited in the afterlife, all this. Right. And she's like, can you believe they're not letting people grieve? They're making it too fast. And I'm like, nope, that's good. They're not letting people.
Are we making that techno-Puritan thing? Funerals can't last over an hour.
Just no funerals.
No funerals.
No, we should build death rituals because it's really important to have death. My point though is that Alyssa Grenfell points to the fact that, oh, can you believe that they are teaching young women that sex isn't going to be enjoyable? And can you believe that they restrict funerals in this way? And can you believe they do this and that without realizing this is a Chesterton's fence issue? Like there is a reason why those things actually have benefits for the culture at large, even though they appear to cause, in many cases, a lack of hedonic pleasure in the immediate term.
Yeah, what you're pointing out here, and I think that this is really valuable, is a lot of people hated how sex negative their religious traditions were, quote unquote, sex negative, like had a negative view of sex and sexuality and sexual indulgence. And they thought that by ripping out that sex negativity and replacing it with sex positivity, but staying Christian, staying whatever, that they were creating like a better form of like Protestantism. And you saw a lot of churches do this and thinking they were being so hip. When in reality, there's a reason for the sex negativity that actually leads to more hedonic, you could almost argue, pleasure for the average person within that community because they're making better choices. And for example, choosing their partner based on arousal, choosing their partner based on, but great aside here.
I just want to I just think that the best religions do set expectations low. And frankly, if you find a partner with whom you have a lot of good sexual chemistry, it's going to happen. Just consider Queen Victoria, right? Like the most like straight-laced, like everything in Albert. And yet, I mean, they had 9 kids and she was into him. She was very into him, although the first meeting it was all about the parent. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Well, I'd also point out for people, one, keep in mind that sexuality on average works very different in men and women. So the idea of saying to a woman telling a guy, you can, change what arouses you or, what you're going to be interested in is quite a different thing. Like, and I think we see this a lot. The people who run a lot of these like sexual reassignment clinics are women, may not understand how much more set in stone male arousal patterns are than female arousal patterns, which I think are much more flexible around stuff like that. Well, we know from the data that they're more flexible around stuff like this. And I'm saying this just to start, like if you're watching this and you're a straight man, like what could somebody do to get you to sleep with a guy? Like seriously, like for me, it would be really, really hard to get me to become aroused by a guy. Like, I just don't think it could easily happen. Like, not if you electrocuted me, not if you electrocuted me every time I didn't get turned on by a guy, not if you had me look at pictures of naked men every day for,
and these are 100% all things that have been done in gay conversion therapy.
Yeah. And
look at these sexy woman pictures. Are you not convinced now? It's just done by people who are so freaking straight. They're like, oh, I can't control myself. Like, they'll not say no to this one. Oh my God.
I'd actually think that would get me more grossed out by women.
100%. Yeah. Because then you're going to be like, why? It's like being exposed to a smell and you're like, listen, I'm just not into that smell. And they're like, no, smell it again, inhale deeper. And then you suddenly are like, I think I'm going to throw up. Like this is.
Yeah, I'm being conditioned to hate, like have a visceral negative reaction to this smell
100%. Yeah. They just make you gayer. You're just getting gayer.
Another thing that's important for people to remember is if you go to our book, The Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality, we lay out a really long argument that disgust is the same emotion as arousal. It's just operating with a negative modifier. Not going to go into long argument here for this, but what it means is that when somebody has inverted sexual patterns, like say a gay man, for example, they are much more likely to have a disgust response to naked female bodies. So it's important to keep in mind that they might actually have an active aversion to sleeping with a woman, which is different than just not being aroused. And that can make things significantly harder, but that can be mollified through many of the things that mollify arousal, which we'll get into in a bit. Okay, so let's start here. What goes on at these, right? Is it But I'm a Cheerleader for people? I used to love that show. One of my favorite movies growing up. Such a good movie. It's about a girl who gets sent to one of these. Very funny. If you haven't seen it, I actually suggest it. It's like an indie film. Anyway, psychotherapeutic methods. So talk therapy is common here. This is the most common form and includes cognitive, behavioral, and interpersonal therapies. Some practitioners use hypnosis to alter thought patterns related to same-sex attraction as well. So then I wanted
just like picturing someone sleeping on a couch and the therapist being like, "You're not gay.
I hypnotized your son to be into chicks.
Boobs are cool." Oh my God, no.
So I was like, okay, so what does this mean exactly, right? So identify and changing thought patterns. Therapists may try to help individuals recognize and alter their thought patterns around same-sex attraction, often by reframing these attractions as unhealthy or undesirable. This seems like a giant mistake to do. For people who aren't aware, if you try to get somebody to not think about something or frame a certain thought as sinful, you get these patterns where people just like will like compulsively think that thing, and they'll think it much more, and they'll feel like negative thoughts when they're thinking about it. Like teachings around sinful thoughts are likely like really deleterious if this is something that you want to handle. It's much better to be like, okay, I understand this is part of who you are. Maybe even it makes sense to continue to masturbate to this stuff, but I wouldn't like what like teaching you to try to avoid and see these thoughts as sinful. This doesn't mean that you can't change people to change how they're thinking about their environment. So by this, what I mean is you could, for example, work with somebody to see an arousing thing is not necessarily a mandate for action, as it is seen within some parts of progressive culture. You know, just because this arouses you doesn't mean you need to do X, or you don't need to think about this as controlling your identity. That could be really helpful in these sorts of therapy, but not, I think, probably everything they're doing. Role playing and behavior modification. Some therapists use role playing to teach stereotypical masculine or feminine behaviors.
Oh, they do this in But I'm a Cheerleader, the movie
Yeah,
you're
they do.
referencing about a lesbian girl who was sent to one of these conversion camps. And I think they all, like, the girls all have to wear pink and the boys all have to wear blue, and they have to.
Girls like have to like do like mopping and like vacuuming, and
Yeah.
the boys have to do like play fighting. And there's that great scene where in the play fighting ring, there's like a cutout of one soldier on his knees and the other has a gun to his head, but it's like stereotype like boy blue.
Backwards. And you slip it in. And out.
Who wants to go down with me?
This almost certainly does nothing. If anything, I'm quite.
But it's funny, so.
It's funny, but it almost certainly, I'd say, gets individuals more into their gender, into their existing like gay or lesbian identity, because you abstract these gender roles into something that feels unnatural for the individual, and you say this is what a natural gender role is, but because they're not enjoying it and it's not, you know, natural in that context. I mean, you've made it an artificial thing in this context. They then think, oh, this isn't for me. Like this, I am not straight, or I would be liking the play fighting or the vacuuming or the other stereotypical women roles. Exploring childhood experiences. Practitioners might explore an individual's childhood experiences, suggesting that same-sex attraction is a result of past trauma or family dynamics. One, it's not. Like there's just this is an area where like I'm not worried about the data. Like
Yeah.
it is not
Psychotherapy nonsense. What did your mother do to you?
Yeah, because of stuff. And I think generally almost any form of psychotherapy or psychological talk to help somebody. This used to be a field that I worked in. People, I'm not like out of nowhere. I actually had memorized the entire DSM at one point. I'm that much of a nerd about this stuff. For people who know, the DSM's like this thick. It's like an insane thing to have memorized it, but I wanted to be cool. That was what I thought the cool kids did. That's how much of a nerd I was. But anyway, if somebody's doing like a what happened to you in your childhood that caused something, that person is not a therapist. That is a cult. That is not a real thing. The reason why people do that is to help break your connection with your support network, which is your parent and birth culture. And then that can be used to build dependency on an individual. This is why if you go to something like a Scientologist like meeting, I've gone to them before to be like, okay, what's like, that's the first thing they'll ask you. So why therapists used to do this before they realized how bad it was, and why it's re-emerged within some of the hokier parts of therapy. And some people like freak out on us on it because they've read books by individuals like, say, Erica Commissar, who's like, oh, all this stuff, children to their parents. And if you actually look at, like, she's a great person, right? Fine person, but her beliefs around like the psychological schools that she finds compelling are like straight up Freudian. It's like, she's like, I'm influenced by Freudian psychology. This is I'm not going to say it's like evil or wrong or anything like that, but it is a theological position, I guess I'd say. It's not bound by like a realistic mechanism.
Yeah, but you would argue, even if we're calling it a cult or a culture, that it doesn't produce great outcomes. So
it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. It's not based on what I would call like a. There's different ways that you can relate to the mind and of something like this, and I would put hers in like if somebody's doing like Kabbalistic therapy or something like that, I'd be like, okay, but that's like a religious therapy. Like, you understand that. Most people would be like, yeah, I understand that. This belief that all of this stuff that happens when you're super young is super important to your adult life. It's just not that important unless it's like really big. Like, you can like traumatize a kid for sure. Like, can you traumatize them into being gay? Probably not, unless you've done some like really serious stuff.
Well, you could give them hormones.
Fear around sleeping with the opposite gender.
You could give them hormones and mess them up.
Oh, you could do that, yeah.
And parents do. So.
Yeah, parents do. But the which would change gender of primary attraction. You're right about that. Could. But and again, here I'm not saying that nothing that happens to you in your childhood matters. It can matter, but it needs to be pretty extreme to matter. It's not like general, like, how much was my mom home has a huge difference. Your mom is like broadly non-abusive and you have somebody caring for you. The difference is not that big. As we can see, when kids grow up in single father households, they don't do that much differently than parents who grow up in two parents households, which is usually because if they're with a father, that's the more responsible person. And so from that, we know a lot of the research on people who grow up in single parent households or other sorts of disruptive households.
There are confounding issues there. Basically, in the United States, if a father is getting the kids, he is so exceptionally better than the mother, then it throws things off. So
but what it shows is if you get a good parent, it's like the same way that the studies that show that like when gay people raise kids, the kids turn out better often than when straight people raise them. And that's mostly an effect of just how hard it is to get kids as a gay couple. That doesn't necessarily indicate, but by this, what I mean is you have to go through like tons and tons of screening to get kids as a gay couple, at least when a lot of the studies were done. I don't know if it's still the case, but I think it is. I mean, my understanding is adoption is astronomically difficult right now.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's still the case. Okay, so then aversion therapy. This involves associating same-sex attractions with unpleasant stimuli such as shocks, nausea, or physical discomfort to create negative association. This is like remembering But I'm a Cheerleader when they shock her.
Yeah.
Every time. Yeah. Does this work? Now, of course, the AI at first was like, well, obviously this can't fix sexuality. But then I'm like, wait. Is aversion therapy used in any other place in psychology these days? Like, because like, obviously it won't say that it works for sexuality, but does it work for anything else? And it's like, well, it's used in addiction treatment. It's like, okay, so well.
It is? Oh. It is.
Aversion therapy can lead to short-term reduction in substance use, but long-term efficacy is debated. Basically, it doesn't have long-term efficacy.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't work. Phobias, again, it's been shown to have some short-term utility, but does not appear to have long-term utility. Same with anxiety behavior. So it's used in self-harm behaviors. Aversion therapy has been used to reduce self-harming behaviors, such as cutting, by associating these players with unpleasant stimuli. But I don't get, isn't like cutting the unpleasant stimuli? If you're just giving someone like an additional unpleasant stimuli, like
you just made Cutting Plus. Congratulations. Upgrade.
Cutting Plus, new mode activated.
Cutting premium version. Yeah. Are we going to talk about what does work? Not for changing orientation, but for at least reducing.
Yeah, well, so they then mentioned medical methods. So hormone and steroidal therapies have been attempted. These are sometimes used under the belief that hormonal imbalances contribute to sexual orientation or gender identity. I love it. It says this as if this is not true. Like, your hormones absolutely determine your, sexual identity. That's why.
Yeah, this is like extremely well attested just based on the way that women's arousal patterns and even interests in different types of male dynamics change throughout their cycle, like even within one person.
The problem is there don't appear to be like good studies on this. So like if I was somebody who like personally absolutely wanted to attempt to change my arousal patterns, I would probably do some hormonal experimentation, but it's just not well studied. Like, we know from trans individuals, plausibly it can change how arousal patterns activate, but I'd imagine you really need to do something that extreme to get a change in patterns. And that like, if I'm a gay man and I just take more testosterone or something, I'm just going to be even more turned on by men. That would be my thought as the main outcome of that. With women, there might be more stuff that you can do in regards to this, but basically the answer here is not enough data to know. Chemical castration. In some extreme cases, this involves using drugs to suppress sexual desire. And I thought it was so funny when I was thinking through, I was like, oh, it's so wild that when I was young, the fear is that, you know, conservatives would come and take away like the young, like tomboy lesbian girl and chemically castrate them. And now those same drugs are being given to that same population by far lefties under the guise of puberty blockers and trans stuff. So that is wild. It does change sex. I mean, I don't think anyone should be doing this to kids. Personally, that's my opinion. But like it does, you know, work in that it does lower arousal patterns, I suppose. And then that got me thinking, I was like, okay, well, suppose I just want to like lower my arousal patterns in general. So I'm not as tempted, right? I was like, what can do that, right? Because obviously things can do that. Like every antidepressant says like, I don't lower your arousal patterns. Do. So anti-androgens can, medications like Ciproactinor and Endicor can reduce testosterone levels and lower sex drive. They're sometimes used in cases of hypersexuality and treatment of sex offenders, so they probably work on a regular person. Or you can just be unhealthy. Dietary adjustments. So for example, soy products, you could become a little soy boy. High intake may lower testosterone levels. Greasy foods will affect sperm production and libido. Refined carbohydrates and excess alcohol consumption all may help. Now, I don't know, because alcohol consumption would lower your ability to suppress the libido. So it might lower libido, but also lower your ability to contain whatever was there. And exercise, that'll also help lower your libido.
Really? That's interesting. I never heard that before.
Oh no, but if you exercise too much, apparently it can lower libido. Like when you did when you were younger, and you ended up losing.
Yeah.
And
because your body thinks you're like migrating and starving.
before I go to the last one, I would argue, like, if I wanted to do this, right? Naltrexone is an absolute wonder drug.
I was just thinking that. But it would just make sex not fun. It wouldn't make you interested in.
But it would make it marginally less fun. So I take enough naltrexone so that I'm only a little addicted to alcohol. I didn't want to give up my alcohol addiction entirely. This is not the way you're supposed to use it, but it actually has like a bunch of other like positive side effects if you take naltrexone.
Yeah, like this is not super well documented, but it may have made him significantly more immune to COVID. Yeah,
because I never got COVID, and I always wondered why. And I was reading a study once, and it was like, oh, low dose naltrexone appears to create immunity to COVID in some people. I was like, that's crazy. But it has like a bunch of other benefits because, you know, now I actually stopped checking Facebook like entirely.
Yeah, I think it's also because Facebook got boring.
It makes you less addicted to social media. It affects those pathways. It can be useful for gambling. It can be useful for anything that's using the opioid pathway to sort of force behavior.
Yeah, food, sex, exercise, gambling, anything but smoking, pretty much, right?
But what's important is that you take it and then you do the thing. So you'd have to like take it and masturbate to gay porn, and then you not be interested in masturbating to gay porn as much within a few weeks of doing that.
Yeah.
You can take it at low doses. If you're like, I still want to enjoy this, I just don't want to enjoy it so much that it's distracting or causes unhealthy behavior. Yeah. Which is, I wanted a little unhealthy behavior with alcohol. I was like, I don't actually want to be a teetotaler, but like, I also don't want to die. And I found a happy medium. I test myself all the time now, and I'm not having any issues. I even got my liver scanned, and it's totally down to a normal size here. It looks like a normal liver. And so which it wasn't for a while. I actually had major problems at one point, which is when I decided I needed to look at this seriously and do something about this.
Yeah.
But I mean, how is that decision particularly different? Like, I was prone to addiction to alcohol, or prone to like really wanting alcohol because of my genetics, right? A person might be prone to same-sex attraction because of something that they can't control. I didn't control that I had a preference for alcohol. And yet I am able to say, and therefore, despite me not choosing this desire, I am choosing to suppress this desire or work to engage with this desire in a fashion that doesn't interfere with other things I want from life. Like,
you're rising above
and everything like that. That's not considered weird. But if I do that for like eating too much with like the haze movement, then it's considered weird. I've always thought haze is an even better example of this. Like, I control my alcohol, or I work to do that, and they don't work to control their food. They're like,
no. Ozempic. Ozempic is the naltrexone of food. people are totally into that.
Yeah, so you could use naltrexone to work on this.
But you pointed out in the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality was you could also just overdose on it.
You can also overdose. That should work. So you do appear to be able to reduce sexual desires of specific varieties by overindulging in them.
Yeah.
And
so like the best gay conversion camps would be like quarterly gay orgies.
Well, I mean, I sometimes wonder if those didn't happen historically.
Yeah, you just got it out of your system, and if I were
okay,
like an actually responsible player in the space, and I actually wanted to help these poor Christian young men and maybe women just like get over it and like go back to the real world and feel normal, this would be the right thing to do. The families wouldn't want to know about it, but if you want to like really reduce their desire, this would be the right thing to do.
Well, I mean, and that might actually be something that's happening. So, I can't talk about my own experience. Again, not slept with a guy at something like the Bohemian Grove, but it has been reported that I've gone in various things. So I can say like, at least I've gone. I can't say any more about the extent of my connection to that, but I can talk about somebody who did go on the record about their experiences there, which was Richard Nixon. And he called it the gayest fucking place on earth.
He actually used a worse word than that, but you can imagine.
Oh yes, he didn't use the F word. And so it's an all male retreat for like elite conservative men. And could it have been, if Richard Nixon's understanding of it was accurate, could it have been a place where a lot of gay people went and slept together? Obviously, that wouldn't be everyone there. There's a lot of other reasons to go to a retreat without women. But when I look at throughout history, the all-male secret societies that elite conservatives went to, and knowing quotes like Richard Nixon talking about one of the things that people who already had this arousal pattern at these specific events may have overindulged in, that they may have served some utility for that. And that's absolutely fascinating.
It's a fun theory. Yeah.
Does that make them more satanic? Who knows?
Doesn't it make them more progressive and normal? Who knows?
What I can tell is somebody who's like gone to all the actual secret society stuff, like the stuff that people have on their records is like so much tamer than anyone thinks it is.
Yeah, but also like their insinuations of what could be worse are so off.
They're so off. They're so off about like where the bad decisions are made behind closed doors and where the
and what the really crazy outlandish stuff is. It's not what you think it is.
Well, yeah, and a lot of these organizations have been taken over by wokes. Like Skull and Bones was totally taken over by wokes. We should probably do an episode on that one day. I guess a lot of people wouldn't have a lot of connections in there, but yeah, Skull and Bones, and it's even in like the media now. Like the media has. I'm not releasing private information here. I don't want to get in trouble. That's why I'm just like being like. But yeah, Skull and Bones totally taken over by the wokes, and I could say that I think the culture war has touched all of these types of locations. And typically the older a place is, the easier and more bureaucratic it is, the easier it was for woke individuals to sort of get their teeth into it and then basically prevent it from serving anything close to its historic function, which is why we run our own secret societies basically now when we go to cities and stuff like that. And we invite people who are like influential in that city. And I'll note here that these are not like fan meetings. Sometimes fans have reached out and been like, I've heard you're meeting with people. It's like, yes, because all of these people have jobs because it's not like for anyone who watches our podcast. But anyway, thoughts before I go into the final stuff here, the faith-based methods.
No, proceed. Oh, you mean we're going to talk about faith-based methods now?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say the faith-based methods are prayer and spiritual counseling. These methods often rely on religious beliefs that view same-sex attraction as sinful or abnormal. They may include anti-gay slurs and prayers. I don't think that this is going to be very effective. If anything, I think it's just going to focus the person's attention on these issues. And then exorcisms, in some cases, exorcisms.
Oh, okay.
Which that actually could work, weirdly. I'm going to say, because an exorcism could be similar to like
going trans, like really just being like, I'm new, I'm a different person, it's gone.
Yeah, like they could see themselves as a new person enough that it might change their arousal patterns. I wouldn't say it.
It could help them contextualize the residual arousal patterns that they feel as remnants of demonic possession and therefore not act on it. And in general, not lean into them. Because I think there's also like, we don't have a lot of control over our sex drives. And areas of orientation. I do think that you can lean into something and you can lean out of something. You can make it a bigger thing, or you can choose to play it down. And that might encourage playing it down.
Yeah. And so broadly speaking, I think that the best thing to do, like if this was a big problem for you and conflicted with your faith and the way you wanted to live your life, something like naltrexone, I think would be the safest way to address this. I think
especially if you're trying to reduce what you see to be problematic behavior that you don't want to have anymore, but it's not going to make you want to do something that you
it's only if you want to get rid of the behavior, right?
Yeah.
Like if you want to reduce these impulses, indulge in them while on naltrexone.
Yes, but I think the bigger thing is you can't make yourself want something that you don't want but wish you wanted.
Yeah. And I'd point out here, now I'm going to say something crazy. I'd point out here, if you want to live a hedonistic life, there are few things you can be born that are better than a gay man. Like I was actually bemoaning this with Simone. I was like, if I was a gay guy, it would be like being able to, one, have an easy time, like with like an orgy where like everyone at the orgy is a woman, first of all, because you're aroused by everyone at the orgy. The thing that grosses me out the most about like the concept of an orgy is like half the people there are going to be guys. Like I don't want to see naked guys.
Gross. Yeah.
That's disgusting to me because I receive a strong disgust response. But if I was a guy, I'd be like an orgy full of women and dating way easier, because you're reaching out to people who aren't assholes, who have, I'm not saying all women are assholes, but I'm saying that being the gatekeepers within sexual marketplaces causes women to relate to men in a way that can be derisive. Like if they don't, women really come off as quite cruel to men within sexual marketplaces because they get spoiled. Seeing like even normal overtures as creepy or whatever wouldn't have to deal with that as much if I wasn't being creepy as a gay man, because they would have a better understanding of me. Another one, you would be dealing with people who are on average more attractive than the general population. I don't know if you have many gay male normal friends, but gay men put a lot more effort into how they look.
Yeah, on average, they take way better care of themselves. Yes.
Yeah. And I was also just thinking, even something like a singles cruise. Like if I was on a gay man on a singles cruise, that's something where you can actually sleep around. With women, you can't do that because women actually want something out of this. There isn't this large pool of women who just wants to sleep around all the time. But all of these men who I was attracted to would also have the male sexual profile of preferring variety. And now, all of this is maybe on the net bad for gay people because it's more temptation. But I'm just saying, if your hedonism maxing, you're actually in a preferable position to be born gay. And
in this age,
with this PrEP and everything like that, which is like AIDS drug and stuff. But that I'll never experience a party like a multi-day gay Fire Island party. There is no straight thing that's the equivalent of that, except maybe a furry party, but that's mostly gay anyway.
There's just always going to be drawbacks there. Yeah, unless you're some historical sultan with a menagerie of women, I guess. There's just
gay people. What do you say? Gay people get to have the sex lives of historic sultans.
Basically, yeah.
Basically,
but it's a little more fun because I think, let's say that you're a sultan with your menagerie of women, you don't get to feel like you've conquered. You don't get to feel like you've won someone over.
Yeah.
Because they're just there because you have money and resources. So I think it's even better now.
Then you murdered their husbands.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying that. Well, that might make it a little hotter,
Yeah. For some, it sort of depends on what you're into.
It depends on what you're into. Yeah. But the point I'm making here is that I think it's cool to revisit these topics that we, for so long, were not allowed to talk about or investigate or think critically about with a more open-minded approach that is less reactive in the way that the progressives and the urban monoculture react to these particular issues.
Yeah. Well, so then I think our takeaway from this is if the Supreme Court overturns state bans on gay conversion therapy, a bunch of businesses are going to maybe start providing it again, but it's not going to do anything. So you're just getting, it's like being oh yes, we now allow homeopathic therapy again. And it's well, okay. I mean, some people are going to make money and some people are going to have their money
I
taken
actually
from
think
them.
it entrenches the issue, because if you look at the types of practices that they're doing, for me, it would cause me to focus more on what's arousing me and help me not see myself as, what could make you think you're not straight more than simulating like a housewife's life with a stranger?
I know.
And a person being like,
how
does
miserable
this feel normal to you?
Yeah, I think like if let's say that we were in like some culture where it's just like super not okay to be gay, we'd just be like, well, like your life is not about pleasure or sex, and whether you were gay or straight, we wouldn't want it to be. We don't want you to be in a straight relationship and straight and obsessed with sex, because that is really not productive. It's almost a blessing that you're gay. So don't worry about it. That's fine. Focus on the things that actually matter and you're okay. That kind of thing. Like, I guess is what we would advise someone to say if they actually were really not okay with their kid being gay.
Well, I mean, I would focus more on the kid. I think that, like, my question here is, should a kid be forced to have an opinion like that? No, a kid shouldn't be forced to have an opinion like that. But if they were brought up in a culture that they like and want to stay in, they should be allowed to pursue therapies and stuff that make it easier to stay in a culture that they want. So I
don't know, like if any of our sons say, listen, we're gay, my first thing is just like, make sure you make a lot of money, because having kids is going to cost you a ton more. But if our daughters turn out to be lesbians, I'll be like, congratulations, you can double up on kids immediately. This is amazing. You've hit the jackpot.
But I would be about as anti our kids going to something like this as I would be our kids, being gender transitioned.
Going through gay conversion.
Yeah, I do not think.
Yeah, no, that just makes things worse. You're absolutely right. It makes things worse.
And I think that in reality, the vast majority, when I talk about like drugs and stuff like that lower libido, the majority of the time I actually think these drugs should be implemented is not necessarily same-sex attraction for young people, but just arousal patterns that the young person finds problematic or deleterious with their daily life. Which some people have. They develop fetishes, or they develop, it was one I saw somebody talking about on a show recently, was they developed like an addiction to like sissy hypno porn. And like, I wouldn't, like, if I was aroused by that, I would probably take a chemical to suppress that. Yeah.
If you don't like it and it doesn't make you feel good about yourself, then let's take some Naltrexone.
I'd be like,
and I bet that there are a lot of gay men who have like a beard, who are in a relationship, and they are the only ones in the world who actually know their arousal pathways, who really wish that they just felt them less. And in this case, Naltrexone would be amazing.
Yeah.
Just make life less.
And so I think it's about being accepting of all lifestyles, both the gay people who want to live as gay people, but also gay people who want to live within cultures that say that you should marry a woman and have kids.
Because again, whoever said that sex was more important than religion, culture, and family?
The urban monoculture, literally.
But that's insane. That's insane. I mean, even for someone who has a lot of sex, the hours of the year that they spend having sex, not that many hours. Not that many in the end.
It's such a weird thing to define identity around.
Yeah, but just like if we're talking pleasure hours, though, like versus other things that could yield more pleasure hours, if that's all you're optimizing for, it just is such a dumb thing to make your life decisions around.
It doesn't make, there's no logic to. I love you, autistic woman, autistic, mostly asexual woman, who's just like, sex doesn't make logical sense.
Give me the argument in favor of its utility, right, Indy?
Yeah. Love you to death, Simone.
I love you so much, Malcolm, and you are very, very, very sexy. I'm gay for you, so.
All right. Well, I'm gay for women.
Thank goodness. That's wonderful.
No, I think you're attractive as well.
Yeah, you're just dealing with post-marriage sex life, which is
well, I mean,
so terrible.
My biology would reward me more by sleeping with lots of other women.
Go ahead.
We have that video. I'm allowed to, but like, it seems like a waste of time.
Remember the last time we were on a college campus around a bunch of people wearing swimsuits? It was like kind of hard. Like there were enough fit guys around, but
the women are not as attractive as they used to be when I was.
The economy is kind of rough right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, ooh.
So yeah, good luck. I'm glad you went on your Rumspringa sexually when you did, because I think
Before you, yeah.
Well, no. Like before women started letting go, I guess, before the
Before
4Bs
women
movement.
started randomly accusing people of things, and before all of these women had.
Yeah, but also like on the
sexualized
whole, I
interacting with
think
me.
college women were more attractive 15 years ago
Yeah.
than they are now. Sorry.
I'm sorry, guys. You've got the mooses, the mises.
Mooses are majestic creatures.
And many people would say that about these scooter beasts roaming college campuses these days.
They're not even scooter beasts. They're like soft
Shapeless.
and unremarkable. Yeah, shapeless. Yeah. Like lumpy space princess.
Yes, that is women on college campus these days. This lumpy space princess.
I know you like me.
No, I don't. I'm just stopping by because...
Just admit it, lover boy. You can't resist me. Well, if you want these lumps, you gotta put a ring on it. Where's my ring?
Ah!
I knew you liked me then. That's why you're running. Get in touch with your feelings, babe.
Sweatpants, the rounded edges. Yeah, there's just no more sharp edges left.
You just want my lumps. I'll post that.
All right. I love you.
Love you too.
That was fun. I just love speaking with you so much.
I love speaking with you too.
All right. Thank you.
By the way, this Lyman Stone article is such a puff piece.
What, the Guardian article?
Yeah, for him.
It's not about Lyman Stone.
It is largely about Lyman Stone.
Well, they hate us. So he
they're-
and they share a common
They're
person
clearly
they
trying
dislike.
to center him as like the pro-natalist you should listen to. They don't say anything
responsible
mean
one.
about him or take anything that he said out of context,
Nope.
which shows that like they are, to anyone who has like media literacy, they are trying to promote him while framing him as a reasonable alternative to us. But the problem is that everything he says in the piece is super like nothing burger. Like watery and you know it's not going to do well. Like nobody's going to.
Families need to be treated better. It is vague, but it is the Guardian, Malcolm. Don't worry about it.
Well, nobody sees it anymore. They don't even have a Twitter account anymore or an X account. I think
Guardian.
they quit.
Oh yes.
Did they get the? You know, all their pieces were getting nerfed. You know, unless they just summarize them, and so. You know, who sees their stuff anymore?
Subscribers, people in the UK, theoretically.
Theoretically. Right.
A shopping cart? That's a pretty full purse. What's going on with the airport?
I said the at the airport, so it got being sick from.
The Predators?
Yeah, it's a smoke.
Oh my gosh, Titan, you have such a full purse.
The police are protecting the police. The police are making sure predators do not get in the airport.
I think the predators of an airport are called terrorists.
Terrorists.
Yes.
Stop interrupting my airport or else.
Terrorizing. Stop terrorizing my airport.
Yeah, terrorizing.